Up until this point I've only really reviewed handheld games and kept my reviews relatively short, and I'll definitely go back to handheld games when the time is right, but for today I'm going to look at a game that is not only one of my favourites of all time, but is arguably a modern day masterpiece in every sense of the word. I'm XYZCruncher, and grab yourself a snack and a drink or two, because this might just be a long one, fellas.
Ratchet & Clank is a run and gun action platformer style game developed by Insomniac Games, who at the time were well known for the Spyro the Dragon trilogy, and was released in November of 2002 to great critical praise across the board.
And rightly so, this game is fantastic, and while it has its flaws, don't get me wrong, I'll get to those soon enough, but first let's go over the plot. Also, we're diving into spoiler territory at this point, so if for whatever reason you haven't played this game, and you really should, stop the video, go play the game, beat it, come back to me, and then let's carry on. But for the rest of you, let's get stuck in. Also, I'm not going to give the whole spiel about Spyro and the development of this game, because you've most likely heard it all before, so I'm not going to bother. But yeah, let's get stuck in for real this time.
The game begins with a mostly silent cutscene of a Lombax, a weird, furry, scaly type of alien thing, named Ratchet, fixing his ship while on a distant planet in a robot manufacturing plant. A small defective robot is born, who after seeing something troubling on an infobot, robots which project video messages, commercials and the like, decides to flee the planet entirely, but gets shot down and ends up crash landing on the planet Velden, which just happens to be where Ratchet is. Ratchet decides to investigate, finding Clank in the process, and takes him back to his ship. Clank then wakes up and asks Ratchet if he can help him find a famous hero, Captain Quark, so he can save the galaxy in exchange for serving as the robotic ignition system Ratchet needs to power his ship. Now you may be naturally wondering what Captain Quark would be saving the galaxy from, and turns out some cunt named Chairman Drek is wanting to destroy a bunch of planets in order to create a new one for his people from what remains of the ones he destroys. Some sound logic there, like.
As soon as they head off the planet, Ratchet and Clank's almost awkward dynamic becomes very apparent, and you almost instantly gain an appreciation for them, and this only grows stronger as the game goes on. Also, I won't be going over every minute part of the story because we'd be here forever, and I really want to focus on the main themes and character interactions of the game.
And if you don't like it, you can take your whiny, snivelling, snot-nosed populations, form a line behind me, and kiss my...
So then Ratchet and Clank crash land on the planet Novalis, I don't fucking know, and boom, immediately you're given something that in this day and age may not seem that incredible, but in its day it was kind of mind-blowing, and even now it's pretty cool. That being branching pathways and optional missions. What I mean by branching pathways is the option to go down different routes, giving the player the freedom to tackle the level in whichever way they please, and backtrack and take different routes if they feel like they're stuck in a certain route and don't want to put the game down.
Now this, quite obviously, is a good thing because it helped it stand out among its contemporaries and most standout platformers throughout gaming history. The reason I call this game a platformer is because it's a platformer in the same vein as GTA is a racing game. Sure, the platforming is there and it's very present considering, but it's not really the meat and potatoes of the game, which would be the combat.
But ignoring that for a second and going back to optional missions are present not only through this game, but throughout the series, and while they're more optional than optional in some cases, it just adds to the freedom already ever present with the branching pathways.
But these branching pathways and optional missions aren't the only thing you come across in this level. You also come across one of the most lovable characters in the entirety of this game, and a recurring one at that. I'm of course talking about the plumber.
Dad, blast it!
Look, plumber's crack.
What did you just say?
I said, look, the plumber's back.
All right, wise guy. Shouldn't you be on one of them escape transports?
Escape transports?
Newsflash, giant robots attacking! The escape transports are taking all the rich folks off this god-darn planet.
So why aren't you on one?
Socioeconomic disparity.
What?
He hasn't got enough bolts.
Working people have to wait for Captain Quark to save us.
Well, got anything worth a lot of bolts?
I got this thing. Shows two weirdos ditching their ship. It's got coordinates to a desert planet, too.
An infobot. Ratchet, we could use that.
The plumber represents one of many things that makes this game, as well as its successors, such a great time. But I'll touch more on that later. Back to the plot for now.
So after interacting with a colourful cast of characters and planet hopping for a bit in search of Captain Quark, they finally come across the famed hero, and he tells them he already knows about Drek and his plans, but convinces Ratchet he can be famous, and then asks them to tackle a gauntlet style obstacle course to prove themselves or some shit. After clearing the obstacle course, our heroes find Quark. While Ratchet is very suspicious, Clank tries to convince him that Quark is going to help them, but Quark promptly sends them down a trap hole and has a monster try to kill them.
This cutscene really displays a character dynamic between our heroes very well, as Clank comes off very naive, firmly believing that Quark will help them save the galaxy, whereas Ratchet, who up until this point in the game has shown very cynical traits, has gone completely paranoid, and rightfully so because his suspicions weren't misguided.
After this cutscene, almost every subsequent one involves constant bickering between our heroes, and while in any other game this would be extremely annoying, but since the characters and dialogue are so well written, it's made up for tenfold when the redemption arc kicks in for Ratchet. After helping out a few other folks on some other planets, our heroes eventually find an infobot where Drek reveals he's found the perfect orbit for his new planet, but he has to blow up a whole existing planet just to obtain that particular orbit, which leads to Ratchet kind of beginning to realise that this whole situation is about more than just him getting his revenge on Quark.
This is where the redemption of Ratchet's shittiness develops slowly but surely. On their hunt for Drek, they come across Quark, and after a pretty good boss battle, Quark is knocked out of the sky and sent crashing down onto a nearby planet.
Captain Quark!
Where?
Come on, Quark, I know it's you.
The name's Steve. Pleased to meet you.
Look, Steve, I need to know where Drek is before it's too late.
Did you say too late? Sir, it is never too late to acquire the latest in the long line of quality products from Gadgetron. I have for you, today only, the Gadgetron PDA.
Public display of affection?
No, personal delivery assistant.
This device allows you to purchase ammunition wherever and whenever you want it.
Yeah? How do I know it works?
You can always trust Gadgetron quality, or my name's not Steve.
So after this, Ratchet and Clank planet up some more, and after one of the greatest cutscenes in all of gaming history plays, the redemption arc is in full effect as Ratchet learns that the planet disrupting Drek's plans is in fact his home planet Volden, where the whole adventure started, and the whole thing just kind of comes full circle. Our heroes then visit Ratchet's home planet for a great final level, which is a kind of gauntlet of sorts, testing and using everything you've learned in your travels up until this point, and pushing you to your absolute limits. So after confronting Drek revealed that he was the one who polluted his home planet, and planned to repeat the whole process over and over and over, just to become rich. And after a pretty epic final boss fight, Drek is sent flying into his planet, and both he and his planet are subsequently blown up. Boom. The end.
Now you may be sitting there asking yourself why I love this game so much, as well as its plot, because while it is super competent, it's nothing super impressive. But that's where the theme of this game, as well as most subsequent games in this franchise, come into play. That being a satirical take on our modern capitalist, money-hungry society.
A classic example of this is the characters in this game often explaining, bargaining, or bullshitting their way into shaking you down for some bolts, even if you've already helped them.
Even Ratchet has this whole self-serving, consumerist nature type of thing kind of woven into his character. I mean, look at this series of cutscenes as proof.
If you can take out all the sand sharks, I just might have a spare hoverboard for you.
We'd love to help you, Mr. McMarks, but Ratchet and I need to find Captain...
One of your boards? I've always wanted a decent hoverboard. Well, alright. You just keep that foot elevated.
So come to Joe Resort and leave your world and your troubles behind.
Joy Resort, Pokitaru.
I knew it.
Oh, come on. Switch off your nerd circuits and have some fun. Look, we'll go just long enough to pick up the O2 mask.
Perhaps the extra oxygen will help your brain to function properly.
Yeah, and maybe the salt water will rust your mouth shut.
The plot itself, as stated earlier, is just about Drek wanting to become rich quick and screwing over his own people just to do so. Again, like I said, accentuating the main theme of this game.
Quark over this and the next few games would also have a redemption arc of sorts, wherein he rebuilds the fame, fortune and popularity he once had before he became a massive corporate shill.
This adds a consumerist layer to the game and its overall vibe, as well as the universe present in the game, because it just goes to show that people in this universe drool over people like Quark and Skid McMarks, just like we would any celebrity here in the real world. All aspects of this theme as a whole helps give this game a very distinct feel and vibe that separates it again from its contemporaries and its successors that were yet to come. This is mainly because of the fact up until this point we had never really had a neo-political satirical setting or vibe for any game that was aimed at kids up until this point, and I don't think we've had any since, to be fair. What makes it even better is it's more indirectly implied more than outright stated, although it is fairly fucking obvious. But it's not done in a way where it's in your face or patronising. It's more so done in a way where you can enjoy the jokes for what they are, even if it's not necessarily your brand of humour, or you just don't understand or haven't noticed the themes present in this game. All of that to one side, what about all of the other aspects of the game?
So the main bulk of the game revolves around action, platforming and shooting shit, and as to be expected with Insomniac games up until this point, the platforming and all the other controls were handled very well, and while I wouldn't necessarily call them super tight or even super smooth, the controls were very responsive. But the reason I can't exactly pinpoint or pigeonhole it as being one or the other is mainly because of the slightly slippery and at times troublesome handling of Ratchet and even Clank at times. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there's more than one playstyle. You get to play as Clank, you have turret sections, battles in ships, and a few others.
All of these handle and control relatively well as you'd expect, to be honest. While these breaks in the formula can make for a nice change of pace, they can oftentimes fall flat on their face if they're not your thing. One that a lot of people I heard complaining about, but I personally didn't mind too much, was the Clank sections. While they didn't blow me away, again they made for a nice laid back change of pace. Going back to the main gameplay, the level design in this game as well as the use of weapons and how they should be used, much like the main plot, is a stroke of subtle genius.
Since this review's probably gone on long enough, I'm not going to bang on about it too much, but the way the levels are structured to find that sweet spot between platforming and shooting and generally just keeping you on your toes is downright phenomenal.
This also raises a point of this game being really the only one in the entire franchise that you could truly call a platformer, if anything. This is because the future entries, see what I did there, focus more on the run and gun aspects of the Ratchet formula, making them a focal point, making the platformer moniker as well as the wrench that is carried in this game pretty much obsolete. And it's a shame because I felt the platforming was very tight and rewarding when you made that difficult jump, and I feel like it could have been built on in the follow-ups with their admittedly better and less slippery controls, I guess. Oh yeah, about that, while I did touch on the controls briefly earlier, I forgot to mention the fact that this game has a lack of proper strafing, which is a sin for a shooter of any kind.
Now there is strafing, but it's very weird and kinda unusable in some instances. This was scrapped in the sequels in favour of real strafing, but luckily you don't need strafing in this game all that much anyway. Going back to the level design, as I mentioned, the levels do require you to be smart, especially in the later planets about how you manage your ammo and use your weapons, because the way you get from point A to point B isn't always as cut and dry as you may think.
A good example of this is, should I use the drones to shield me or should I just go in head first? Should I use the Agents of Doom to distract my enemies or maybe just take out a few while I get the jump on them?
Again, while this isn't some massively genius idea, this does add a layer to the gameplay that also means you might not tackle certain situations in the Ratchet games as your friends do, as you may have different methods for taking on enemies and such.
And while we're on the subject, I personally think that this weapon lineup might be one of the weakest, if not the weakest, weapon lineup in the entire franchise.
Don't get me wrong, there are some great weapons, but it's quite evident the team behind the game didn't want to blow their creative load just yet and were holding off on the possibility of a sequel.
My personal favourites are the Visibomb gun, a kind of remote control rocket launcher type of thing, and the Agents of Doom. This is mainly because they require a fair bit of strategy to use, and while the Agents of Doom can be kind of cheap at times, they're not so cheap that you'd feel bad for using them, if that makes sense. My least favourite has to be the Walloper. I've heard people say it's useful, but I'm sorry guys, I just don't see it. It seems like it just does what the wrench does, but just kind of worse, I guess. So, moving on to the graphics, they still hold up, but are very PS2, if that makes sense. The graphical style is very endearing. It's quite rustic and working class looking. Yet again, another thing that supports the vibe and overall theme of this game.
And call me insane, but I personally think the PS2 and PSP era games, regardless of the quality of the actual titles themselves, are probably the best looking ones in the franchise. Before you guys grill me in the comments or whatever, I'd just like to explain myself. Like I said, the aesthetic of this game fits the theme they were going for really well, And while the future saga and the PS4 reboot of sorts look great, they seem like they're trying to look and be these huge blockbuster Pixar movies or some shit. And while that's fine, it does not feel very Ratchet and Clank, and I feel a slight graphical shift may have been one of many factors as to why the franchise had fallen off after the 3rd or 4th game.
Moving on from that, the soundtrack has a lot of memorable tracks, but a lot of samey ones at that. Ratchet and Clank just has that type of soundtrack where you listen to it and you just know it's a Ratchet and Clank song, and again, sorry to be a broken record, but it just adds to the overall vibe and feel of this game. Yet another thing I feel was lost in the future entries, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So all in all, Ratchet and Clank is a fantastic game, and if for whatever godforsaken reason you haven't played this game or any of the original trilogy, you need to do so right fucking now, because yeah, they all have something to add to the conversation, and they're just generally great games and they won't disappoint at all. So if this seems like your type of thing, definitely pick it up. Oh Jesus Christ, thanks for watching guys if you got this far. Yeah, I always appreciate your guys' support. Sorry for not uploading for ages, but if you saw my last video and you stuck around to the end, you'd know that my laptop broken down and they just gave me the runaround for a while, but I've finally managed to get a new one, so I got to working on these videos, but it has been over a month. But don't worry, I'll try and like make up for that and try and make some smaller videos just to supplement this one, so you guys have something to watch. I'm going to try and focus entirely on YouTube and my music, which I'm working on the side, which should be done by the end of July maybe. I'm not, fingers crossed, I'm not going to jinx it, but yeah, hopefully nothing goes wrong on either front, and I'll have something to show for this summer, I guess. But yeah, like I said, I'm going all in. I always forget to plug it, so feel free to follow me on Twitter. It'll give me a reason to kind of post on there. I'll always be posting updates and just kind of having conversations with you guys if you guys are interested. I'll probably leave like a little my Twitter handle and like a little animation here or there. But yeah, feel free to check me out on there. Yeah, again, I always appreciate and love your guys' support. It really does mean the world to me. I'm hoping to get some substantial growth this year. So if you're new here, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, share with your friends, all that fun stuff. Feel free to leave a comment below about what you think about Ratchet and Clank. And yeah, I might be working on some second channel videos soon, although there is some fuckery with logging into the second channel, so I'm gonna have to sort that out first. But all in all, again, thank you for watching. Sorry to be a broken record, but yeah, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Stay cool, stay safe, stay crunchy. I'm out. Peace.